So let's get now to, first of all, just more generally, you actually see some, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you think there might actually still be some hiccups in finalizing this tax bill as the Republicans go into conference. Now, and we should be clear, and you can elaborate on this, that again, even just sort of calling it a tax bill in some ways kind of minimizes. I mean, this really is this would structurally set in place the kind of next wave of deepening inequality and even affect austerity at a state level. So this is a major goal for Republican legislators and the people who fund them. But you still think they're going to potentially run into trouble here? I mean, if that's so, what's the dynamic behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I think almost certainly they're going to get this thing through. The fact that they've been willing to do so far to get these tax cuts to the point where they've gotten suggests that they're willing to do anything.
Right.
That said, the problem that they have is that their ruthlessness came back to bite them on the Senate bill because they were obsessed with trying to pass it last Friday, even though they had to massively rewrite it for a variety of reasons, and everyone saw the scribbles in the margins. Basically what happened was they were initially planning to get rid of the corporate alternative minimum tax. Mm-hmm. So right now you've got the statutory top corporate rate that's 35%, and then you have all these deductions and tax credits. And basically the alternative minimum tax says, all right, no matter how many deductions you rack up, you can't go below 20%. You got to pay 20% of your profits, except, of course, for the profits that you stash overseas and that you don't pay anything on, right, which is a whole other part of this. Anyhow, so they take the alternative minimum tax out, they lower the top corporate rate to 20%, and then on Friday, McConnell promises Collins that he'll put in this $10,000 property deduction because they're getting rid of otherwise the SALT deduction, the state and local income tax deduction in high-income states. Collins wants to, preserve that upper middle class benefit, so he puts that back in. Ron Johnson is getting an extremely big tax break for the kind of businesses that his family owns. He owns a pass-through business, mm-hmm. Which is totally unjustifiably getting a giant tax cut, even though no economic theory says that giving a tax break to pass-through businesses is a good idea. But right. He wants an even bigger tax break.
Wait, what's
than
his
they're
business?
Offering
his family has a real. They don't own like some little boutique, right? I mean, it's a pretty large scale business that he's involved in, right?
I gotta look it up. Yeah. I thought it was, is it a car dealership?
I think it's something like that. Yeah. Anyways, okay. Yeah, that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he wants an even bigger present, right. And he was able to you got to actually respect Ron John, who's widely regarded as a very dumb man.
Yes.
But when he saw Corker and Flake holding up the bill because of deficit concerns, he latched on as the third. But he wasn't actually concerned about the deficit. He just wanted a larger tax break for his family, and was able to get that.
And in that sense, he is truly the quintessential Republican. Like, it's so embarrassing that the press even can still give a second to these people grandstanding about the deficit. But when a guy says, I will hold this up to literally personally net my family more income, that's who you should be listening to. That is the core of the Republican Party right there.
Oh, absolutely. So McConnell makes these concessions, and suddenly the tax bill gets way more expensive. They have this $1.5 trillion cap on how much it can cost because of the budget resolution they passed, complicated Senate rules. And so they need new revenue stat on Friday night if they're going to pass this by the end of the week, like McConnell has decided he has to for no particular reason. And so they decided, we'll put the corporate alternative minimum tax back into the bill. But they forgot to lower the corporate alternative minimum income tax. So now they have a statutory rate of 20%, the regular rate, and then you can collect as many deductions as you want, but you can't go below 20%. So they set the two rates at the exact same level, which means that almost all corporate deductions suddenly are now worthless.
Mm.
It actually and it's a $300 billion difference. They basically took $300 billion worth of tax cuts away from their corporate donors, and their corporate donors are pissed.
Right. So what are they going to do? This is the whole point of the tax cut, is give away to people like their corporate donors.
Right. And certain kinds of businesses, this will really nullify the benefit of the tax cut almost entirely. So that puts them in the position now where they have this bill that they actually, initially they were thinking, maybe we'll go to conference with the House, we'll reconcile the bill that the House passed and the bill that the Senate passed. But also we have like a 3-vote margin in the Senate. We don't want to test that again. So if there's any trouble in conference, we'll just have the House pass what the Senate passed. Mm-hmm. Now that's a very, very undesirable option. A lot of their corporate donors will flip out if they pass the Senate version through the House and make that the law, which means they got to go back to the Senate. I don't know if they actually had a crisis and had to choose between no tax cuts and doing the tax cut that eliminates corporate deductions, which ironically is actually like what tax reform traditionally is lower the rates and get rid of deductions.
Right.
But the donors don't want that. I think they probably pass it anyway, but who knows? They've got a really undesirable situation here. And the other factor is that, it passed by 2 votes in the Senate. And Susan Collins said that she was only voting to repeal the individual mandate in Obamacare, which found its way into the tax bill, because McConnell promised her that as soon as she votes for this tax cut, Republicans will pass new funding shoring up Obamacare. They'll replace the subsidies that Trump canceled, and they'll establish this reinsurance program to lower premiums. And she said, so I'm not really like betraying you guys on health care because I got these promises that
she should
the damage I'm
totally
about to vote
take
for.
that to the bank for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
And House conservatives, Paul Ryan, are not willing to give Collins cover for another couple of weeks. They're already saying, no, we're not going to do that. Or at least we're not promising to do that. We never promised to do that. McConnell can't tell you what we're going to do. And so Collins doesn't have a fig leaf anymore. Now she needs to vote to sabotage Obamacare without pretending that she knows that she's going to be able to fix it afterwards.
Right.
And there are people occupying Susan Collins' office today. She's under a lot of pressure. This tax bill is not getting more popular.
Right.
It's the least popular piece of tax legislation in modern American history, which is astounding because that means it's a tax cut that is less popular than any tax hike that's been passed in the last 4 decades. Which is unprecedented.
And people, I think it's so naked. I mean, it's like if you get to the analogy I always use is that, John McCain voted to give his trust fund baby daughter a gift of a untaxed estate. And if you're making $40,000 a year or $30,000 a year, you have to work harder and probably end up paying a bit more to subsidize that gift. I mean, that's really there's a lot more, not to mention even the things that, like I know that the deduction for graduate students got taken out of the Senate version. I mean, but there has been, and the attack on Obamacare, which we already kind of went through. I mean, it's hard to hide the ball on what this is. And then when you even have like a meeting with Gary Cohn and a bunch of executives not even raising their hands to pretend that they're going to use this to reinvest in jobs, I mean, it becomes kind of hard.
And Republican lawmakers saying out loud, asked by the press, why are you pushing forward with this? And saying, like, as their official line, the donors are going to,
Yes.
I think Lindsey Graham and Congressman Chris Collins said, like, the financial contributions are going to dry up if we don't do this. The bill is an expression of the Republican Party's confidence that American democracy is no longer functional.
Right.
That is the bet that they are proudly making right now, is that we have, that sucker isn't getting up. We knocked the crap out of it, and it is not going to be able to stand back up.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos